Welcome to the Knowledge for Men show. Your life will never be the same.
Your level of success will seldom exceed your level of personal development.
I want to die empty of regret. I want to die empty of my best work. We don't understand who we are. Instead, we're living out somebody else's narrative.
What one man can do, another man can do. If it's been done, it can be done again.
Being yourself and being your truest, most authentic self in every moment. If it scares you or makes you a little afraid, do it. Follow your heart and your gut.
The first stage, I think, is finding you, like finding out who I am today.
Stuff will not work. You will have things that fail. Success is when you're a happy, fulfilled person. How do you define success?
It's your life, and you are the creator of the movie script that is your life story.
Hey, my team and I are offering a 3-day intensive retreat in San Diego, California. This retreat is going to be so powerful and transformative. My team and I will show you how to discover yourself, your true potential, and help you find your path and purpose in life and uncover the warrior's courage that is within you. I literally put my heart and soul into this program, and the reason why you want this is because I will save you time and money from having to figure out all of this on your own. There are only 10 spots available for the retreat, so go to kfmretreat.com to learn more and apply for the program. Again, that's kfmretreat.com. All right, guys, welcome to the show. I'm here with Abel James. He's a #1 best-selling author, top 10 app developer, musician, radio show host, entrepreneur, and health crusader. Abel's work has been featured in Wired Magazine, Paleo Living, and hundreds of media outlets in business, technology, psychology, and health. He's got an upcoming book called The Wild Diet. I'm very excited to have Abel on the show today.
Hey, what's cooking, Andrew? Thanks for listening, everybody.
All right. And Abel, we start off every show with like a favorite success quote or a saying that the guest has lived by. So what do you got for us? And share with us why you chose that, what it means to you.
This one I got when I was young. I grew up in the middle of nowhere in New Hampshire. And so I worked with my dad, who was a stonemason, but I also started working in restaurants and did some catering stuff. And there was this like crazy Armenian dude who was always causing trouble. And whenever he got into trouble, he'd just kind of look at me and say in an accent that I totally can't repeat. Every kick in the butt is a step forward. He didn't say but
yeah.
Basically, I've tried to use that as a perfectionist, deep in my heart. It's something I've struggled with for a long time, is facing failures and just realizing that it helps you kind of navigate the world from that point on, as long as you learn the right lesson. So it was cool to see how his life kind of played out and the things that happened to him, and learn that lesson in the flesh, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. It's a big lesson. Every kick in the butt, every failure, it's a step forward. When you view challenges like that, it's like you just feel like you can do it. Like you feel like you can do anything. You feel like there's just so much opportunity. There's just so much growth that's capable from anything that you try.
Totally.
Yeah. Are you going to give us the Armenian accent version?
I wish I could.
Oh, man.
There's one thing I'm really bad at. It's impressions. I can do impressions of myself, making fun of myself, but it's...
All right.
When I have a few drinks, my New Hampshirean accent comes out pretty heavy.
Oh, man. Why don't you have a few drinks and we'll get it going?
Yeah, this could get really interesting.
Yeah, you do have more interviews coming up, so that'd be funny. All right, let's dive into your story of how you got started with what you do. You got this incredible bio, this profile of all these great things that you've done. Take us back to the heydays before you had the radio show host, while you were maybe like after college. Like, what was it like for you? How did you get started with what you do?
Yeah, well, like I said, I was kind of from this tiny little town in New Hampshire, and all I wanted to do was get out of there. It's like podunk towns and nothing to do, and so everyone kind of wanted to get out of there. And so my genius was kind of a survival mechanism in a lot of ways, because we didn't have money to go to like private school or private college or anything like that. So I really had to get super scrappy and learn how to get money out of nowhere. So I've been doing this for a long time, but mostly in the, like I shared before the interview, in the form of music. When I was a little kid, I started playing in diners and playing Christmas songs in the local like shopping outlet place, and playing clarinet and saxophone. And then when I was a teenager, that was actually my first foray into the internet world and kind of the internet marketing side of things. Because as a band or as a musician, it's really up to you to market yourself. And so I made a CD when I was like 14 years old with me playing all the instruments like overdubbed on a computer that crashed every like 15 seconds. But it was, and then I built my own website and learned how to kind of like do all that. And I actually had a really interesting conversation with one of my teachers who was a career musician and a music teacher. And he's just like, Abel, don't do music. You have so many other things going and it's not a good profession. It's a fun thing to do, but it's not a good profession. And coming from, a career musician, that was kind of like a huge letdown.
Yeah, it's a huge slap in the face.
Yeah.
You would think he'd be all about it, like supporting you, like, oh, I believe in you.
Right. And it was crazy because there was so, I won a bunch of awards and stuff like that on the music side. But I mean, he was right. Like, I didn't want to have a midlife crisis when I was like 20 years old. And so I at that point, I was thinking of going to Berklee College of Music in Boston to study jazz and composition. But I decided instead to go to a liberal arts college. So I went to Dartmouth, but couldn't afford it and almost had to drop out every year.
Yeah.
So continued to play gigs and just learn these weird little things like programming where I could make, a few bucks making a website for someone or something like that. And then eventually that took me to the options of going to Wall Street, the CIA, or a consulting gig in DC. And
those are pretty diverse. Wall Street, CIA.
It's kind of crazy.
Where did the CIA come in?
Well, that was a really weird one. So
yeah.
At some schools like Dartmouth and Ivy League schools and MIT and stuff like that, they have a bunch of different Fortune 500 corporations and government organizations that come in and try to recruit kids straight into their programs. And so the CIA was one of them.
Jason Bourne. It's like, have you heard of Jason Bourne?
Oh my God. I sent in my resume and it was definitely not, it was for like political analyst or something like that. And they got me an interview for weapons analyst. And like I walked in there realizing that it was, none of them had their own names. It was all, a front or whatever. And basically, I'm just like, you guys realize I know nothing about weapons, right? And they're like, yeah, obviously. Like they had a laugh that they thought I was, taken aback by something like that. But yeah, I decided not to go in that direction, and instead started working with Fortune 500s and the federal government in energy and oil. Actually worked on the Keystone Pipeline way back when, and a bunch of other crazy stuff like that. But one of the things I learned, which we can get to in other parts of the story later, and that I explain in my book, is I learned a lot about food when I worked with the chemical companies and the big food industry. And what I learned was pretty unsettling.
Like what chemical companies were doing to like the large food corporations?
And what they were, the back scratching and back and forth, and basically how I actually come on my dad's side from a family of farmers. They were dairy farmers. So there was a very like close connection with the land and with food and with like, looking your farmer in the eye and having it be kind of a small town farmer's market type feel to making dinner. And what I learned when I was in DC was basically that most of these companies, they're not necessarily evil. You know what I mean? I'm not a big like conspiracy theory guy or anything like that, but it's more about what their responsibilities are. And when they hired us, what we were doing with them is basically optimizing their bottom line every quarter, because their responsibility is to the shareholders, not to the people who are drinking their products or eating their products, who are becoming addicted to their products because they're designed to be addictive. So it kind of like dehumanized the whole food system. And that's one of the biggest inputs into why we're struggling so much today, because man, just driving down the highway, looking at the billboards, the things that does to your mind is pretty intense.
Or just like on television, commercials,
or on anywhere,
internet. Yeah.
Really. Yeah. Like what we're up against is totally unprecedented. It used to be that food was something that you worked for all day and then cooked all night. And now it's something that you have to dodge 24/7.
Get out of my way. No, I can't eat this.
Right. Totally.
And just briefly, you were talking about music back then. Have you sseen Whiplash, the movie?
I haven't yet.
Oh man, it's got your name written all over it. All right, cool. You haven't seen it. we'll just dodge that. You have a book like Intro to Paleo. You've written other like recipe books on Amazon.
Yeah.
Was it here at this point, when you had this job and you started diving into this?
Yeah. Well, a lot of people in kind of the podcast or internet internet world know me from my show, which is called Fat Burning Man. And that was something that I started like 4 years ago, but I actually started before that using kind of a pseudonym because I wasn't comfortable.
Yeah, in every internet marketer. See, what was your alias?
My blog was called Honest Abe's Tips.
All right.
It was a picture of like Abraham Lincoln peeking out behind the keyboard. And it was basically just a place where I shared things about what it's like to live in a healthy way and navigate some of the things that I knew the inside of, if that makes sense, from the big food industry. But I wasn't, necessarily able to share them with everyone. But then it got to the point I was kind of drinking the Kool-Aid. So for me, when I got out of college and got this job, it was awesome, not just because I could, work really hard and pay off my loans, but also because for the first time in my life, I had like really good Cadillac insurance. So I love to test myself and kind of preempt any problems or whatever. So I went to the best doctor I could find in DC and basically said, okay, so I've been an athlete. I've always been in like good shape. And my folks, though, have some problems with, my grandfather died of a brain tumor. My mom has thyroid problems and all these other various things. And so I had my blood work done often. I'd go in there like once every week or two. And but the first thing he did was put me on a very strict diet to make sure that I didn't get the problems that, my family struggled with, the high triglycerides and kind of like cholesterol issues, stuff that a lot of people struggle with and are struggling with younger and younger. And so for me, every time I went in over the course of time working in DC, and I was working too hard. I was working a day job. I was moonlighting, computer programming, and then playing gigs on nights and weekends. So I was kind of strung out, and lifestyle factors are a big thing. But mostly it was the diet. And every time I came in, he's just like, listen, you need to stop eating fat. You need to have even less. You need to eat less food because I can see your numbers are going up. And
were you overeating, or you were just? Why does he say eat less food? Like, were you overeating, or you're just eating the wrong types of foods?
Well, he was saying, don't eat any red meat. Eat low fat, eat low calorie. And so I was eating less and less, but I continued to put on weight and fat and lose muscle. And all of a sudden, it got to this point where I looked at myself in the mirror, and I'm like more than 20 pounds overweight. And I remember growing up, my dad was a stonemason and always just like big and strong and thin and in like good shape. And then the economy tanked and he lost all the work. Like everyone canceled the construction jobs.
Wow.
And so he had to take a desk job. And in like 6 months, he put on like 30 plus pounds and went from being, strapping to a desk jockey and just kind of like, looking 20 years older than he was before. And I saw that start to happen to me. And at first, I kind of wrote it off to genetics because, if you've ever seen the political shows about what people look like in DC, I mean, it's pretty spot on. Like Kevin Spacey isn't looking so good these days. And I think that's kind of what you just kind of get used to it because everyone starts to look like that, right? As you go through life, especially guys today. It didn't used to be like that, but now it's really, you look around or you go to a reunion and everyone looks 10 years older than they should. I think it's kind of a common thing, but I basically said, okay, like this isn't working. What else can I try? And at the time I'd been reading into my brother loved Pumping Iron, the
old Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Like, the whole like underground bodybuilding thing. So I got some like underground bodybuilding opuses and read through all of that crazy stuff and looked at the cyclical ketogenic diet and kind of like a high fat approach to losing fat. And I'm just like, well, if there's an opposite to what I'm doing, it's definitely something high fat. And so I just decided to try that and eat lots of grass-fed butter, bacon, eggs, coconut oil, avocado, super fatty things that I'd been really avoiding before. And it was like about a month, all that excess weight came off. I got back to like my high school weight. I was, all of a sudden had this ripped six-pack and looked like Wolverine.
Just from eating foods. Like, are you doing a pretty heavy workout regimen or?
I've always been physically active for sure. And so there was muscle under there, but the problem was the fat that was over it. And I think a lot of guys are kind of in that boat. Like you do actually have some tone in your arms. You just don't really realize it because the flab has subsumed everything else and kind of covered it all up. So that was really the case for me. I mean, I'm not a big fan of the whole like fad dieting and all these crazy stories of people losing a lot of weight quickly. But for me, it was like, I couldn't believe how easy that was. And I wasn't, you'd think that someone would be totally stoked about that, but I was kind of bummed out because I realized I got burned. I was, drinking the wrong Kool-Aid, and that has some pretty serious repercussions for being such a normal story, right? Like you see that happen to almost everyone all of a sudden you're popping pills and you have cholesterol problems or whatever, and you're not in shape anymore. The answer though is so much easier than what I thought it was. And so that's why I started up Fat Burning Man, the podcast, just to kind of like try to show people that you can be happy and healthy at the same time. It's just about kind of getting back to your roots, getting back to the fundamentals, and realizing that you have all the answers yourself. You just kind of have to like align your habits with the right workouts and the right kinds of food so that you're not duped into the latest fad thing.
So what did your diet look like before you discovered this? Like talking about meals, like foods that you eat compared to what it is today. Like what does your breakfast look like today versus, before and your dinner and such?
Before I was eating every like 2 to 3 hours. So I'd eat breakfast and, I'd eat lots of whole grains, and that would make up a lot of my calories because, when you don't really eat fat, there's not much else it can come from.
Right.
It's like carbs or protein, and protein is kind of like tough to overeat. And I'd always, I was a vegetarian for a while, so I went back and forth on that. So I was getting a lot protein from, tofu and soy products and other things that I was told were healthy from my doctor. And
it sounds like a pretty good diet. I mean, whole grains and tofu.
It sounds like a really good diet, but it's not what it's all. Like basically, that diet is really easy to abuse because when you walk into a store, I mean, you can see it now, even with gluten-free and paleo stuff. Like just because it has gluten-free on it, or vegan, or vegetarian, or low calorie, or low fat, doesn't mean it's good for you. In fact, most of the stuff that has that marketing spin on the front isn't good for you. It's just processed food that appears to line up with whatever the latest fad diet is.
Like when Doritos say 21 grams of whole grains on the front.
Right, it's a joke.
She's like, it's Doritos. I don't get it. What do you mean?
It's easy to fall for though, right? Because eating Cheerios in the morning, our parents told us that was healthy. The commercials told us that was healthy. The magazines and the TV shows and our doctors told us that was healthy. So I thought I was doing something that was very healthy. And, with my low fat or skim milk, that is kind of, when it comes to eating, that's missing the point of what makes you healthy. It's not about like what you're dodging in your food. Like this is the first time in history really that we're eating food and trying to get less food in it, right? Like less sugar, fewer calories, less fat, fewer carbs, whatever it is. What we really should be doing is getting food as close to the source as possible, the freshest food we can, and looking at nutrients that we're getting from this food. Like what is the purpose for every morsel that crosses our lips? There should be a reason that you're eating it, and you should be enjoying it, not just kind of like sucking down a burrito in the front seat of a car on the way to something else, which is, I think, really tempting to do these days because we're all busy and the commercials are screaming at us. And, by the end of the day, usually our willpower is all kind of used up.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, when I look at something I'm going to eat, like I look at the back and then I go like, oh, this looks good. It looks healthy. I look at the back, I look at ingredients, and it's like a full paragraph of ingredients. And I'm like, this is just bread.
Yeah.
This is just one item. And it's just like got a whole list of, all these chemicals and like, whoa, that's just seems like a little too much there.
Yeah, totally.
So you're basically, it sounds like you're saying like organic foods, like something, if it's from the earth, like that's probably a better option.
Basically, if you're eating food, there are two camps, and one of them is straight out of a horror movie. We have, factory raised cattle and pigs and chickens that are never able to use their legs and covered in their own feces, and just treated in a way that is the opposite of humane. And when you eat sick animals like that are pumped full of hormones and antibiotics, never get to use their own muscles, that translates directly to you. The food industry really likes to let people believe that food comes in, that steaks come in packages or, from a steak restaurant. But the truth is they're usually coming from that world, unless you go with the organic, grass-fed, small local farms that, my brother is an organic farmer, and he, the trouble with the English language is that what he works on is called a farm, and these enormous monocrops that are running on petroleum fertilizer, petroleum fuel, and then petroleum-based chemicals. They're called the same thing, but it's a fundamentally different thing. Farming in the organic kind of old school way, where the food almost grows itself, and you just need to get out of nature's way and make sure you can let the harvest work as well as it can that season, as opposed to fighting nature with a bunch of chemicals that were developed in World War II, which is kind of where we're at. But all of a sudden, the chemical companies started producing our food instead of the farmers.
Wow. So this could kind of be like if we're having a dinner and on the table, like we had some chemicals and we just like sprinkled that like salt and pepper on our food.
Right.
Like,
we're doing it anyway.
It
we
gets
just
rid of
yeah, we don't have that image, unfortunately.
I mean, if that's the analogy, like I'm changing my diet right now. Like, here's the thing. Like, I think I eat, just this morning. Like, I had a green smoothie. I had a banana, some spinach, kale, carrots, and strawberries. But the thing is, I don't think any of that was organic. Besides the kale, it's just, for some reason that's just like cheaper, organic or at Trader Joe's. But like, what do you think about? So I'm eating, fruits and vegetables, but they're not organic.
Just eating fruits and vegetables to begin with, you're better off than like 90% of people out there. That's right. I'm never going to argue with eating more vegetables, especially. Fruit can actually go either way. A lot of fruit today has been bred, especially the not organic variety, has been bred to be as sweet as possible because people buy sweet things more. But it has more to do with marketing and money than anything else. And a lot of people don't realize until they travel internationally that a lot of these fruits we're eating in America it's like they turned a wolf into a chihuahua. It's not even close to what Johnny Appleseed was, planting back in the day, according to that farce or whatever. What we're looking at today is a lot of food that, actually, I explain in the book, I kind of have this hypothetical situation where you have this apple that was picked down the road from a local orchard from a farmer, this organic apple. And it's kind of small and funny looking and not super shiny or whatever. And then you have this other apple that, say, it's from a gas station or maybe the local supermarket, and it's, super plump, got the perfect shape. It's called Red Delicious or something like that.
It's like flexing, basically. It's like the apple is flexing. It's like, hey, check out my muscles. Like, it's like a bodybuilder.
Right. Yeah, totally. But then it's, covered in wax. And a lot of times they pick these fruits when they're not ripe, and then they gas them. They do this with peaches and pears and apples and a lot of other fruits. They gas them with ethylene gas to make them look like they're ripe. It basically changes a bunch of the chemicals on the inside, and so it makes them look really good. Then they cover them with wax and polish it all up, and then they spray it with more junk or whatever and preservatives, because usually those fruits are from Chile or some other part of the world, and they've been just kind of sitting in the bottom of a tanker for a few months on their way to you. And so if you put those apples next to each other and then a worm approaches, which apple do you think the worm's going to go for? Every time it's going to go for the organic one, the one that's not dead and rotten and all polished up and covered with chemicals and wax. And we like to think that we're better or smarter than nature. But, a dog's nose is pretty perceptive, and we have a lot of the capabilities to develop our own nose and palate the way that a lot of animals would. Like, they know not to eat poison most of the time. There are exceptions, of course, but we have a harder time knowing what's poison because the vast majority of the stuff you find in the supermarket either is impregnated with poison, is straight up poison, or is covered in poison. So it's shocking what passes for food, especially in America these days. Like other countries won't touch it or import our meats or a lot of our fruits and vegetables. So that's a long way of answering your question. But basically, if you want to know the short version of what you should be eating, as close to natural in the true sense of the word as possible, organic, free of chemicals and other stuff like that. Primarily vegetables, and stay away from sugar and refined grains. And sugar is even in, the modern bananas that we eat today, and the apples and the citrus, and certainly the juices, which are passed for being healthy a lot of the time, but are pretty much just as bad as soda these days.
Yeah, this is good. Now, I think the first thing that I'm thinking, if this is something new to me, is, man, like organic food just costs more. Like grass-fed beef just costs more. Now, what do you say to that? Like, hey, it costs more, but like, do you have any analogies, or how do you respond to that?
It's more like regular food costs less is the way that I think of it, but it's not actually food. So like I was saying before, one thing that happened to our food, it's like, let's use eggs as an example. And I have a few pictures of this on my blog. But if you compare the dozen eggs that you get at Walmart for 99 cents with a thin shell and that pale yolk and kind of that mucousy membrane that makes up the whites, when you compare that to one that you get at a farmer's market, an organic, free-roaming, pasture-raised chicken that grew up eating its natural diet of seeds and grubs and getting all the nutrients from those animals, compared to the other chicken that was eating usually GMO grains that come from the chemical and petroleum industries, and sometimes things like, they'll feed cattle cement kiln dust because somehow that fattens them. Usually it destroys their liver, which makes animals put on fat. So if you're getting your eggs from animals that are treated like that, and comparing the food that you're looking at, even if it's, say it costs 6 times more, which sometimes it does, getting a dozen eggs for $6 at the farmer's market compared to 99 cents for a dozen eggs. If you compare those eggs and you look at them, you taste them, you smell them, they are not even close to the same thing. And if you look at the nutrients that are in your food, the 99-cent eggs have almost no nutrients. In fact, a lot of the yolk will instead have the antibiotics and the growth hormones and the chemical residues that came straight from the chicken that was mistreated in a factory farm, compared to the pasture-raised chicken, which is thriving and healthy. And when an animal is really healthy, it also translates a lot of those nutrients to its eggs. I mean, think about it. That's what an egg should and does in the natural world, contain all the nutrition it takes to grow this tiny little cell into a chirping chick in just a few days, in a few weeks. Like it's a remarkable thing. And when you learn to kind of honor that nature's got this, instead of thinking that like, PepsiCo has got this.
All right.
They've got something, but they've got something else. You really want to go more on the natural side of things. So yeah, it might seem to be more expensive, but diabetes is really expensive too. Cancer is really expensive. And when you're eating chemicals your entire life, it's kind of hard for us we're so caught up in the now a lot of the time. It's hard for us to envision a lifetime, 20 years of eating the wrong food or eating cheap food from a industrial system that doesn't value the health of the consumer. It's hard to kind of look at that and say, well, I'm going to get cancer when I'm 50 as opposed to 70 or something like that, eating this way. We don't really think about it that way, but that's what we see unfolding in front of us in slow motion as the next generation starts to get diabetes and cancer, and at younger and younger age. And food is really the best medicine.
I mean, the way that you described the eggs, you probably went in so much detail. Like, I was like, man, it keeps going. I'm never going to eat a 99-cent egg again.
Right?
Man.
I just need to kind of... The English language, I've never liked it that much. And because it's so easy to abuse with things like wheat is another example where the wheat that we're eating today is not even close to what we were eating just one generation ago. It's 1/3 the size. It's full of novel substances that cause autoimmune issues and other diseases and disorders that are just exploding right now, and no one knows that it's coming from their bagels and their cereal and other stuff like that. But yeah, I could go on forever.
Yeah. So here's another thing, and it's like, what about when we're going to a restaurant? You know, they're probably not using, because there's a reason why, you know, you can get a breakfast for $5 or $7, and you know they're probably not using that organic stuff.
Yeah, they're not.
Just plain and simple, they're not. So do you mostly eat and cook from home, or do you make your meals and take them to work, or you,
yeah.
Is that how your diet is? Like, you pretty much do everything in your kitchen and you make things to go?
It was it's always an evolving process, but I think the closer we can get to cooking all of our food, the better we'll all be. That doesn't mean that everyone can do that or will do that, but I do it as much as I possibly can. And we'll go out to dinner, but it'll be at the right place, you know, where there's a huge difference between food that brags about being cheap, which is usually bad for you, and food that brags about being really good, which oftentimes is really good for you. So if you go to like a fancy restaurant that they serve pasture-raised meat and grass-fed dairy and other really fresh heirloom foods like fruits and vegetables, they serve that because it tastes better. Like, foodies know the difference between a pale tomato that comes from an industrial farm or was gassed or something like that, and a fresh heirloom beefsteak tomato that comes from a local farm. They get all their food as fresh as possible. So we try to go to places like that, or eat at farmers markets. But a lot of the time, we make our own food. And so you said, you know, a cheap breakfast, $5, $7, whatever. Even if you go back to my example of the expensive eggs from before, $6 for, you know, a dozen eggs. And that's even overpaying. I mean, you can find it for less than that if you're willing to look. But if you're getting these eggs for that, I mean, 2 eggs and in a salad or some cooked up greens or maybe a bit of rice or just eggs and cheese and bacon, that's a whole meal for me. 2 of them, right? And you get to do that 6 times. So if you look at if it takes you 3 to 5 minutes to whip that up in the morning, then not only are you saving money, but a lot of times you're saving time because you don't have to drive to go get food or, you know, wait in lines or do whatever it takes to get breakfast, you know, before you're, you know, jettisoning yourself to work. So it's really, I love cooking at home.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you aware of any cool new companies out that are providing this local, like local foods that they can like deliver it to you, or anything that's like kind of upcoming on the horizon?
Yeah, it's cool because this way of eating, the like slow food movement and being healthy, is like getting cool and fashionable now, which is it's a good and a bad thing, right? But I'm never going to stop people from eating some fresh veggies that, you know, were grown down the street or in their backyard. It's awesome, even if people are doing it for vanity's sake, for their own health's sake, for the kids' sake, for the world's sake. It doesn't matter. Anything in between. It's a good action. It's something that's going to not only improve. This is one of the great dirty little tricks of, like, if people follow my show or they follow my stuff for long enough, they start to realize that not only is eating healthy, eating this way from, you know, the natural world close to the source, it's not only good for their health, but they have to believe in a better world. You know, you have to believe in the small local farmers who are getting dirt underneath their fingernails and, you know, like growing a healthy ecosystem as their farm, as opposed to what we're voting for right now with our dollar, which is these vast monocrops of usually soy, wheat, and corn, where the farmers are mostly just like tractor drivers, and they're losing money every year, and the chemical companies and petroleum companies and big food are making tons of money. When you buy organic food, your money goes to the food. And when you buy like inorganic processed food, it goes straight to the marketer with a Maserati, because that's where most of their company kind of plays, is the marketing world and distribution. They don't really play in food very much.
Wow, this is really powerful. This is transformational, and I think to kind of like put all this together and say, like, why do this? Like, how has this transformed your overall performance? Because you do so many things, like, you know, you're writing, you have the podcast, app developer, you're a musician. You even said earlier, you're like, hey, I got 7 more interviews today. Like, you're really busy. Yeah. And How has this, improved your performance from maybe before you started this type of diet?
You mean when I was dragging butt in DC, looking 20 years older than I was? I was drinking the Kool-Aid that everyone else was drinking. Sometimes literally, because we worked with some beverage companies. But it's so easy now. It's like health happens automatically. I'm shocked with what I can get away with. How much wine I can drink sometimes, but it's good wine, right? You start to apply this lens to everything that you do in life. Like if you're not satisfied by a mediocre meal, you're always going to be looking for the best one, or learning to be a better cook, to be better at that. And then you get this momentum through this healthy lifestyle because you feel so good. Not only does this fresh food taste good, but you also kind of become superhuman. You have a lot of advantages over people who are addicted to Diet Coke, or going and eating, their morning Jack from Jack in the Box every morning or something like that. Your brain is clearer. You carry less fat. You don't clog up your system with all these hormones and antibiotics and artificial chemicals that come in most food, because you're just not eating it anymore. And once your palate starts to come back and you get your flavors from fresh food as opposed to industrial salts and chemicals, it's like you live in an entirely different world. And the things that you see some people eating, you're like, that doesn't even look like food anymore. And you really look forward to your own home cooked dinners.
Yeah, I think that really kind of ties it together. It's kind of like, why spend more? Why this? It's not only for your health, but the way that I look at it is that investment in that better quality food is you said, it can make you perform better. And if I can perform better, then I can probably make more money to compensate for that extra cost in food.
My salary, a lot of this stuff kind of happened around the same time, but my salary went from like low six figures to 10 times that, and has kept going up ever since I've started kind of living this way, which is weird. I mean, I'm under eating during the day. Yesterday, I also had 7 interviews, and I didn't eat a meal until dinner time around 6 p.m. And we do that most days. It's a really unconventional way of doing it, but if you work your way up from skipping a meal every once in a while, or just kind of like fueling more with fat as opposed to carbs, it's amazing what you're capable of physically and mentally.
Wow. I think you just said 10 times. I mean, that is, I think a lot of people are going to change the way they eat after listening to the show.
Cool.
Let's jump into the knowledge round. We'll just ask a few questions. We kind of went a little bit longer there, but just got a few questions here. So are you ready for the knowledge round, Abel?
Hit it.
All right.
Welcome to the Knowledge Round, where the guests will be asked rapid-fire questions to give the audience invaluable pieces of wisdom to help transform their lives. Starting in 3, 2, 1, showtime.
First question I have for you, Abel, is what advice would you give to someone who's feeling kind of lost or unsure of their purpose?
Sit down. Well, actually, when I was young, this is one of the best gifts I ever received. It was I read this book, and it was The Secret of How Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Edison and Da Vinci and all these other people kind of achieved amazing things. And it was by very simply keeping a journal or keeping a notebook and writing down your thoughts, writing down what you want, writing down things that you're thankful for, or just little pieces of gratitude, or just doing a brain dump on a piece of paper. So if you don't know where you're going, know that you can correct that and go basically anywhere you want. I mean, if you look at my bio, I've been all over the place, and it's nuts. You can do that too. It's just a matter of kind of figuring out what that is. What are you excited about? Write that down, and then see if you can kind of work it into whatever you're doing tomorrow.
I like that. Simple, and it just sounds too simple. And it's like, I wanted something more, but
I do it every day. That's my secret. My secrets are really boring.
It says a lot. I think sometimes the answers are right in front of us, and we choose to look for like this new formula.
Right.
What was holding you back from becoming the man you are now today?
I think it's for a while there, I had shame, and I think that held me back a lot. But for example, going from Honest Abe's Tips, where my aunt read it and not many other people at all read this dinky little blog, compared to Fat Burning Man, which is this picture of me with my shirt off pulling a Mark Sisson and just being half naked everywhere on the internet, being like, this is me, this is how we live, and this is kind of just like that's what I realized, right? Is when I was looking at reading someone's book about health or diet or really about anything, the first thing I'd do is flip it over and look at like, who wrote this? What do they look like? Are they walking their talk? And so I wanted to make sure that people were under no misconceptions about who I was, where I was, whatever. This is, kind of an open book, so to speak. And I think it was that, there was a lot of people saying, you're crazy, when I first started doing this, because I went from doing, keynotes for the federal government, dressed up in a suit, shaking hands, to being half naked on the internet, selling abs or whatever, right?
Right.
But you need to be willing to kind of make those jumps. And for all the naysayers, just, say thank you. I appreciate your opinion, and then go and just rock it.
I like that. And now this is more of a scenario for you. Imagine you had 60 seconds with your 20-year-old self. What would you tell him to do, and what would you tell him not to do?
I would
anything goes.
Goes. I would say it's a heavy question, but I like it. I would say you always know what's right. If you're trying to navigate the world, if you're lost, like you were talking about before, all it takes is kind of trusting your gut, because deep down, ethically, morally, and even, in terms of like what you should do with your life or where you should go to dinner, your gut knows way better than overthinking it does. So it would be that. And then I would say something to start doing would be meditating. I've been doing it for probably 5 years, but every day. And I think if I'd started 5 years before that, it would have paid some huge dividends, because it's almost like this exponential thing where you really get your life and your habits and your emotions under control when you work it into your daily practice. Yeah,
absolutely. And just to kind of maybe sum some of this stuff up, or maybe even just reflect back to where you were, like you just said, in DC, shaking hands, to becoming this, the best-selling author. And I know that this next book is going to be amazing. It's going to do so much for your career and where you want to go. You're an app developer, musician, you're wildly successful podcast. What would you say is your philosophy on life and success?
Defining it. That's the hardest part, but it's defining it. Actually, I met one of my kind of like mentors and certainly an example of success. This guy, this was years ago when I first kind of got started writing my own books, and he'd been doing this for a long time. He's this multimillionaire, lives in a super expensive place in California and drives this fast car and has his own company and does whatever he wants. And he kind of looked at me and said, I'm so bored. Like, it's not that much fun. I wish I could get there. And I realized in looking at him, because if I moved my life ahead, that was what I thought I would have wanted at his age or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
And so I just kind of realized that you never actually get there. So you have to realize that you're there right now. It never gets better or worse. It's just this. And if you do want to kind of like change something, if you're not happy with the way that it's going or the way that you feel, it's up to you to do it. No one else is going to do it for you. You can't kind of like be reactive and chase life around. If you really want to get what you want, you have to decide what you want.
There it is. That's very powerful. And just taking a second to reflect on that. I think when you look at someone who has everything, who has kind of the American dream or this like, Playboy lifestyle, you think he has it all, but sometimes, he might be looking at someone else thinking that he has it all.
Yeah, exactly. It's very interesting.
I like that. This is it. End the knowledge around there, but you have this book coming out, The Wild Diet. When's it launching? How can my audience, get this? Is there a website they can check out?
Yeah. Easiest way to get it is wilddietbook.com. And if you put in your email address, we just gave away a drone and like GoPros and cooking gear and a bunch of fun stuff. So it's wilddietbook.com.
All right. And how else can my audience follow up with you? Or is that where you want them to go?
Yeah, you can also go to fatburningman.com. That's where you can find my my health podcast and show and a bunch of other fun stuff. And then also, I just recorded an album with a bunch of crazy cats from Nashville that'll be coming out in the next couple of months called Swamp Thing. So I think we'll put it under Abel and Friends Swamp Thing. So you can look for that too.
Swamp Thing. All right. I like it. That's good. That's good. Abel, it's been great having you be on the show. You've shared your story, your life lessons. You've been vulnerable. It gave us a lot of cool insights into how to live a healthier lifestyle. You for sure changed the way that I'm looking at my own health.
Cool.
And this has been good. This has been really good. I can't wait to publish this, impact thousands of men around the world.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks everyone for listening.
Thank you for listening to the Knowledge for Men podcast. Hundreds of interviews and 1 million downloads later, we're continuing to build an international movement, and we've just started. So if you enjoyed this episode, go ahead and leave a review in iTunes. It really helps to grow the podcast. Guys, 2015 is the official year of living with purpose, where every day you do only the things that matter to you. You wake up, live with purpose, and take massive action towards the life you want. Check out kfmfree.com to get free tools I've created to help you crush life. Again, that's kfmfree.com. This is your host, Andrew Fairby, and I'll see you in the next episode.